you had me come speak out once last year, and it was after Harvey, and so I went and spoke about Harvey, what happened, kind of what I got from it, my experience. But originally, I was supposed to be coming to speak about race.
Yeah.
Why was that a topic you wanted approached at your Life Night?
Because this is a topic that people don't like to touch, and I feel like that's one reason that our ministry has grown, is that we're not scared to speak on truth, right? And so it was really big when the whole Black Lives Matter, police brutality was like in every headline, and I wanted to cover it because Black lives do matter, and what does that look like? And the community that I live in right now is an affluent community, your stereotypical American suburb, and so it was like, oh, well, all lives matter, which is true. All lives matter, both in the womb, outside the womb, right? All life matters.
Yeah.
But when you say all lives matter, it almost shuts down somebody who's saying Black lives matter, because they're not saying, well, white lives don't matter, but they're saying our lives haven't been treated like they matter, and I've seen, like I said, I know from talking to my father, so somebody who served in Vietnam, was wounded 4 times in Vietnam, serving our country, and he comes back and is treated as a second-class citizen at times. Like, that's not right.
That's not long ago.
Not long ago. That's the thing. This is my father. Like, this is who taught me. And that's the thing, is like, my father went to an all-segregated school. This is my grandparent, my great-granddad, some ancestor down the line. Like, this is my father. And so I think that's important to note. And so for me, like, I wanted my teams to understand, like, okay, what is it actually like to be a minority? Because we have Houston's a diverse city, so I have a lot of Hispanics, I have a few African Americans, I have Asians in my youth group. But the majority is white. I would say it's not a massive majority, but it's the majority. And so the majority don't know what it's like to be somebody who's the minority. And like, you're treated different. It feels different. You're judged. It's all your whole perspective, your whole life, vision, your frame of life changes. And so I wanted to put them in the shoes of somebody else and realize, like, yeah, you can say all lives matter, but you need to say Black lives matter too, because a lot of times in our country, Black lives haven't mattered, Native American lives haven't mattered, and realizing that Jesus was not a Republican. Jesus, on the flip side, wasn't a Democrat, right? He was somebody who spoke truth. And so whatever the issue is, even if it seemed polarizing at the time or currently, I'm not scared to address it, because truth is always going to prevail. And I've never done a pro-life night, I've never done a Black Lives Matter, a gun violence night, where people haven't left and I got complaints. I've never actually have got a complaint on that. I've gotten complaints before nights. Someone, why are you doing this? But once I'll invite you. Parents, do you want to come? If you're not coming, come. Yeah. Because I have nothing to hide. I'm not trying to promote an agenda. I don't want you to go vote Democrat or vote Republican. I want you to think as Jesus would think, right? And to think freely, right? And use your best judgment to treat people as Christ does. And if you are only viewing the world out of one lens, you're not going to be a well-rounded Christian, because Jesus is he's the Lord of all nations. And so that's why I brought you in for that night. And then we had this massive hurricane, just straight destruction. Chris's church was under 4 feet of water, and our focus kind of changed. Like, yes, Black lives matter, but right now all our lives are all our lives are flashing before our eyes. So how do we deal with this tragedy? So that's why we flipped topics.
So specifically, like race has always been an issue, a topic. These past recent years, it's come to the forefront with Black Lives Matter and the police brutality. But looking at it from your Catholic lens, how has living in our country, especially in our church as a Catholic, how's that been for you? Interaction with people, or seeing what people say or post online who are Catholic, or maybe things you hear from the staff. And we're not looking for names, just like around people who are Catholic, talking about race. How's the experience been for you?
Disheartening, probably would be a good word. And I feel like the reason is a lot of the people who are true to what the church teaches tend to be more conservative in nature, right? Which is not a bad thing. Like, if you're a Republican, more power to you. And then on the flip side, the people who tend to be more welcoming in the church tend to be far on the extreme liberal side, right? So it's like, oh, well, you know, Black Lives Matter, but also, you know, anybody can be a priest, and you know, we should just change all these rules in the church.
Abortion on demand.
Yeah, abortion is fine, and like the church also doesn't teach that, right? So I'm not going to just like cling to those people because it's false teaching. But then when you see someone who's teaching true liturgy, right, true theology, and just, you know, beautiful, you know, they have, like I said, a beautiful feel for the liturgy, a beautiful understanding of Scripture, what Jesus is saying, and then they talk about how great, you know, some of the racist ideals of this country are. It's disheartening. I think, I mean, you can see a lot of it right now. I mean, the wall, like, that's just, it's bad. It's just not gonna work. It's honestly, people are like, is it morally wrong? I mean, you need to secure your borders, so is it morally wrong? Maybe not, but the reasoning for it is just a false narrative, right? And it's a false narrative against Hispanic people, against Middle Eastern people. And I'm all about national security. I'm all about keeping criminals and terrorists out of this country. But you see stuff like that. You see stuff with the police brutality where you have senators from this state who go on a debate and they ask them about the police officer who walked into a man's apartment, thought it was her apartment, killed the guy who had no weapon, said it was self-defense because she was in her own apartment, and the senator says, well, it's an honest mistake. We shouldn't prosecute our police officers.
Yeah.
You literally walked into a man's house and shot him while he's watching TV. Yeah. And he shouldn't be she shouldn't be prosecuted for that. That's an injustice, you know. Yeah. And so we see a lot. And my little brother, you know, he is a police officer. And
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's something where he, you know, it's close to home. I'm not against police. I have a lot of friends who are police officers, but if he does something unjust, I want him or any other police officer to be held accountable for it. And when you see people in the church who are not ever looking at what, you know, somebody who wasn't raised in Catholic school, who doesn't look just like them, is feeling or going through, it's very disheartening. And so it's been something where I've had the whole like pat on the back, and not just from like Catholic people, but from Christian people or from people in general, like, well, no, I don't have a problem with black people. I just have a problem with insert the N-word. And they're like, you know, it's different. And I'm like, first off, you can't say that, but what do you mean it's different? And they're like, oh, well, you know, an N-word is somebody who's, you know, really ghetto and doesn't talk right and is, you know, committing crimes.
Doesn't talk right.
Yeah, doesn't talk right.
According to who?
You know, blah, blah, blah. But like a black person, you know, it's just somebody who's just, you know, has dark skin, like, and it's just like everybody else. But I'm like, I don't say like I hate white people, you know, oh, just the trailer trash, you know, like just the low income, you know, drug users. But I like no, it's just white people, like are white people, right? And there's bad white people, there's good white people, and there's a lot of white people in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Just like black people. And so this whole idea, like that, depending on how ghetto you are, is how good you are, and a lot of how you talk is how you were raised. The people you talk like the people you grew up around. And so it's disheartening when people who have authority in the church are using it to promote an agenda or to promote language that is really contrary to what Jesus would have taught. And it doesn't. You don't have to be liberal minded to realize that Jesus believed in authentic diversity, right? And that he was all about all races, and that he was Middle Eastern, not Italian, unlike all the pictures we have of Jesus. And so that's one thing when I put images of Jesus in my youth spaces, I make sure that I use a diversity. Because I'm like, if you relate to Italian Jesus, that's great, because all it is supposed to help you. We don't even have a picture of Jesus. You don't actually have a picture of him to look at. So if this picture of Italian Jesus helps lead you into prayer, that's fantastic. But somebody like you who grew up might relate more to the darker skinned Jesus. And if that's leading you closer in prayer, like, that's the point.
Yeah.
And so I try to always mix things in like that so that it's just something that's natural. And then I try to break stereotypes by like, oh, like I'm somebody who is a mixed Catholic American, and I'm living the fullest of the church teaching, and I'm enjoying it. And so I don't know. You don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to dress a certain way. Your hair can be dreaded. Your hair can be short. You can dress nice. You can, do whatever. As long as you're in line with church teaching, your hobbies can be what they are. You don't have to look a certain way. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that.
Yeah, like being Catholic is like this one way. You dress this way, you look this way, Mass looks this way. This kind of music, all this stuff, and then anything that veers from that. In reality, anything that veers from what I'm comfortable with, what I'm used to seeing, is going to be wrong, or I'm going to fight against.
I remember when I was working in North Carolina, so I did some mission work in North Carolina over a couple summers. I had somebody say to me there was a Nigerian Igbo Mass going on, and they used the drums. 'Cause Nigeria, that's what you use with Mass.
Here they.
And no, that's literally what the person was like, is that even like a valid Mass?
Uh-huh.
And I just lost my cool because it was just such an ignorant statement. And I'm like, not everything is going to be your organ Mass. I was just going off, and like this person was like a deer in the headlights. And I apologized because I went off a little bit, but I didn't apologize for my sentiment. And I stood to it, and they actually apologized to me. I never thought about it that way. But there's a lot of ignorance like that, right? Like that culturally is an African Mass, which is a beautiful thing. And you're saying it's not valid because it doesn't fit your standard white suburban church.
It's like people forget what Catholic means. Like universal. It's worldwide. Like people are gonna look different, speak different, sing, worship different. There are different rites in the church. Like not even, we have other valid masses that don't look like our mass. At your church or at my church. I have a church I used to work at. There's a retired couple, and they'll travel around the world and do photography. That's like their hobby. And they were somewhere, some like island, Micronesia or somewhere, but in the Mass, the altar boys and altar girls, altar boys were wearing like a grass skirt and nothing else. Altar girls were wearing a grass skirt and nothing else, so topless. It was a valid Mass, and these were good, faithful people, holy people seeking holiness, but it was Mass. But here are these topless people only wearing like grass skirts. Like you go to like somewhere in Africa, and like Mass is 3 hours long because like they worship forever, and like bringing the book of the Gospels down takes like 20 minutes because they're gonna but it's still Catholic. It's still the Mass. It's still holy. It's still good. What has been your experience with a race issue in youth ministry? Like, have you had any difficulties in dealing with youth?
It's a lot of the same things, a lot of that ignorance, right? Because I work at a suburban church right now, and so a lot of it's like, oh, like, this is how black people are, or how Mexican people are, or whatever. So, especially
broad strokes.
Yeah, broad strokes. Especially with the teens being young, I'm able to, hey, like, that's not right. And one thing I will say with this generation, man, it's, a lot of people hate on the Generation Z and millennials, but I would much rather be around a generation that's erring on the side of everyone is equal and it should be equal and treated fairly than like the generations prior where it's like, I'm better. Right? And yes, sometimes this generation errs in too far and like, oh, well, like you can do whatever you do as long as it makes you happy, because there's a lot of false narrative in that, right? Just because you have freedom to have a surgery, to change your body doesn't mean that'll make you happy, right? So I don't think that's true, right? And sometimes, but I'd much rather teach kids who, like, what's the basis of like our faith is like human dignity is one of the primary bases. So like everyone's like, yeah, we're on the same page. So when I'm like, that's an ignorant broad stroke, they're like, oh, let me step back. And I'm seeing less and less of it each year, which is fantastic. But again, just trying to open their minds, and I don't know, I think the biggest thing is like, I don't wear my hat forward, which might sound funny, but like I wear my hat backwards or sideways, and somebody's like, oh, yo, what's up, dog? Or like, and I'm like, don't talk to me like that. Like, talk to me like you respect, every other adult. Yeah. It's like, oh, snap, like, just because you wear your hat a certain way or you have your hair a certain way, like, you need to be treated with respect, and I think more and more each day, teens are clinging to that, and so it hasn't been too much of a problem,
That's
honestly,
good.
with my teens.
Yeah, I experienced that same thing, and you're just like throughout the years, and then they're just being teens, and like they see TV and movies, and they react to that, and that becomes their reality.
It's kind of funny because I actually had an experience with you like that. So we actually are at neighboring parishes, and I'm not going to get into any details really, but I basically had a parent like, yeah, I'm not sure about Chris and that other youth minister, and I'm like, what's wrong with them? And like, oh, well, they got tattoos and long hair, and they're just a little rough looking, and I'm like, yeah, but they're Chris is a great guy. The other guy over there, he's great. Like, I'm not really sure what you mean. And she kind of started like, oh well, I just was saying that like I liked you, and I was like, okay, well, like why didn't you say that?
I'm glad.
Kind of called her on it without I'm trying to be professional, right? Because at work and not lose my cool. But I'm like, you're telling me how much you like my program, and teaching about Jesus, but now you're saying something really completely against what Jesus would say about other people. I'm confused, and so I see stuff like that as fairly common, and I'm sure people probably say things about me while I'm not there, but it is what it is. I don't really care.
Yeah, probably one of the most awkward things that's happened to me in ministry was it was back when I was interning in Austin, and there was this one girl in our group. I think she was in middle school at the time, maybe just in high school, and she told me that her biology teacher at school said that black people have extra tendons
in their foot,
right? Just anywhere. That's why they're so good at sports and jumping and running. I was like, well, did he like correct that and like say I'm joking or something? He's like, no. I was like, he literally just taught you that.
Oh my gosh!
Like your biology teacher who hopefully went to school and studied some biology. I was like, what are you talking about? Does he teach phrenology? And the other one was after Harvey, when we were in people's houses and working, and I had a friend who flew in from out of town for 4 or 5 days he just wants to come and work. I was like, you want to hang out, go into Houston, grab a bite? He's like, no, like I'm here to work, like that's it. And so there was one day where it was me, him, and like a couple other like teens who they were off work, they were out of school for like 2 or 3 weeks. And so some of them were helping with us, and my friend, he's more or less half black, half white, much darker than I am, and like for all intents and purposes, looks black. And so I'm taking a couple of these teens home, and they start talking about how the mail service started back up. It's a big deal, we're getting our mail again. And one of them says, yeah, we have a woman, and she's black. And the other one goes, well, is she black or is she a nigger? And I was like,
oh,
guys, just like,
wow.
Shut it down right then and there. And my friend was like, what are you doing here? He's like, you gotta lock this down and put them in their place. I was like, it was so odd because
that was a teen that said that?
It was a teen that said that, and it was so odd because for him, outside looking at it and not being part of like the ministry of the community, like, and even for myself, easy to be like enraged,
right?
But for me, it was just like, you know what, like, I love these guys, and I'm here to love them, like that's it, and like we'll talk about it, and then even back I think a month or two later, I actually had to call some guys out for actually a lot of like inappropriate, bigoted stuff going on, but I was just like, I'm here to love them, and like there are things like that in the area, that's what I'm here to do. And it was just so unfortunate with someone who came in to literally help the community, and they were like he's in the front seat, like he's with you, and you're talking this way.
Yeah, kind of to go back to a couple things that you had said, I just kind of thought about. That's one thing I get a lot. It's like, well, you don't look black. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, not all black people look the same, or mixed people look the same. Especially, there's people who have darker parents than me who are lighter skinned than me, and that's called being mixed. Mm-hmm. And then I also experienced probably more racial issues, definitely more racial issues with other youth ministers than other teens.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And some of the most bigoted things said were by other youth ministers. I was actually on a retreat on the bus with a youth minister who said that everyone in Africa is either super poor or super rich. And then there's no middle class anywhere. And I was like, you realize Africa's a continent.
A continent, yeah.
Not just like
a country.
a country.
The country of
and
Africa.
It was arguing till he was blue in the face. And my teens, like, I got hot and my teens were getting mad and like, and I'm
everyone's gathering around.
Yeah, and I'm like,
and
normally, like, a youth minister says something like, I'm going to defend them to an extent and then kind of correct them in private.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can't even correct this in private. Like, this has got to be in the open. And, like, a lot of my kids really thought negatively of that youth minister from that point on, and I didn't tell them to. But, you know, they saw, like, he's pretty bigoted. I'm like, well, what do I say to that? I'm like, well, maybe it was just a bad perspective on that and try to, like, give him the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, like...
It's like sheer ignorance.
It was.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah. What do you wish people knew about, like, what would you like people to know about your experience, you know, in the church, race issues? What do you wish they would know?
That what you say matters. Probably be the first, right? A lot of why I said I stuck around in the church was my hard-headedness. So maybe if somebody wasn't as hard-headed as me, they might have been discouraged and left because they didn't feel welcomed or a part of the church, and that's a very sad thing. Also is, are you Catholic American or are you American Catholic? And I feel like most people in our country are American Catholics, and they put their politics or their worldview ahead of their faith. And Jesus asked us just to do the opposite of that, right? You might have to say, hey, this Democrat did a great thing, this Republican did a bad thing, or this Democrat did a horrible thing, this Republican did a great thing, or this black person did, or this police officer. But, you know, if I'm all Black Lives Matter, well, now I can't say a police officer did something good, right? Because it goes again.
Yeah.
But if he did, I should say it. And a lot of people, they get so stuck in, like, their group or their political party that they no longer think for themselves, and it plagues our country. So just that what you say matters, and to think as Christ thinks, because he doesn't think within the bounds of or the confines of a certain group or political party.
Yeah, because I mean, I even personally had that experience. Like when I was in Austin, I found a Catholic talk radio station I fell in love with, and then when my internship was over, I moved back to Houston and found conservative talk radio, and just like fell into it, like head over heels for it. And I started thinking, like, yeah, like racism isn't a big issue, like chase all the immigrants, find them, send them back, blah blah. Then I started thinking, well, let me see what like the church teaches about this stuff and immigration and all that. And I was like, oh, it doesn't say these things at all. A lot of it's like the opposite. So I was like, no, like I have to see like what my faith teaches first, and like have that, you know, mold, you know, how I live and how I speak and interact with people. And especially, and then it was even more important that I had actual interaction with those people, you know, coming to a relationship with Erica, who's Argentinian, first generation American. You know, she still has family back in Argentina. Parents and family immigrated here. You know, I got to meet people and help people financially, you know, get here to America. Know people who came across the border and like the terrible like experiences they had and the things they saw. It's just like, no, like we have to follow like what Christ says first, and not like what this pundit or this station or this channel says. What do you think the church's role should be in race relations, race issues, or not even just that, just dealing with those difficult, awkward, uncomfortable topics?
You got to hit them head on. I think we've done a little bit better with the immigration, with abortion lately. But the church as the body, where we mess up is we look at things like as an issue. So this is abortion, this is gay marriage, this is racism. We don't look at like the actual like physical people going through it. And so in abstract you know, the abstract idea, it's fine to be like, oh yeah, abortion is horrible, and it is. But have you talked to a woman who's like terrified and is pregnant out of rape, or pregnant out of you know, totally not planned, doesn't have the finances? Like, were you there for her?
Yeah.
You're, you know, all against immigrants, but have you ever talked to somebody who was an illegal immigrant and maybe they've been here since they were 1 year old and had no control, or maybe they came here at 30 because they made basically no money and wanted to support their family? Like, it's a lot easier to make decisions about people when you look at the issues as abstract, but are you actually looking at the people?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And then as a governing body of the church, we need to be accountable. We need to hold people accountable. We need to stand up for truth. And our hierarchy, to some extent, has failed us. But I feel like, with the sexual abuse scandal and things like that, but I feel like we're at a point where we're starting to become more transparent and hopefully more bold in preaching the truth. So that's my hope, but it's got to come from the hierarchy on down. But the body has to be the first one we have to approach people. Like, how do we reach out in racial issues that you have? You got to go to the inner city or go to the areas of the suburbs or wherever that these ethnic groups are, and you got to address them and try to understand their culture and talk to them. But by running your little Bible study just in your church, like, there's nothing wrong with Bible study, but if you don't invite, you're just going to have the same people and their kids, and it's never going to change.
Yeah. You might just answer this, but my last question is, how would you advise people to be faithful Catholics dealing with all these issues?
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is Christ's church, guided by the Holy Spirit. So cling to that, right? Because when you cling to people, they'll always let you down. This, you're married. I hope to be married in a few months, right? That person can't be your everything.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times we get people we look up to, and even like a Father Mike, amazing priest. He might say something one day that you disagree with, because he's a fallible person, right?
Yeah.
And if your hope is all in him, that could really crush your faith. But ultimately, that what the church doctrine teaches is true, and that's why I'm Catholic. And then from that, we call all the people to the highest standard. We live to the highest standard too. I can't sit here and say, "Oh, I'm so great. I know all the intricacies of the church," but then I'm also gossiping, or I'm also being lustful. Like, am I building the kingdom?
Yeah.
So you got to self-reflect, but then also know that the church is the true path, and then ultimately that it's through Jesus, and so don't put your hope in people, and the gospel's pretty clear on that.
Yeah, I think for me it's been, especially in not just in ministry life, but just like where my heart's been in the past like 5 or 6 years, is just like, we're talking about topics and issues, but until you get in front of someone face to face and getting to know where they're from, what they've been through, like one of the most upsetting things I saw someone say was, immigration. Like, how dare these mothers break these laws? They're going to be raising like criminals, or how dare these mothers, take these kids across like crime-ridden, cartel-ridden areas of the world? Like, how dare they? And it's like, did you stop and think why?
Right.
Like because you're saying this, I'm assuming you've never been in a situation where you had that choice to say, I'm going to risk my son or daughter's life and send them across these places for a better life, or like, I'm going to risk our lives and take all of us through these places across the border for something better, But until you stop and ask that, you're just going to be coming from your personal viewpoint, and you won't be getting to know that person. You won't be able to see like through a different lens, because they have a different experience of life, a different background. They've faced other things, and the rest of the world isn't like your little community.
Exactly.